Hey, Alta Nitro Nerds here, and this is a new video series I'm doing called What's the Problem? The idea here is let's allow my issues become something that you can take advantage and hopefully learn from. And I assure you, I have a lot of issues with my RC vehicles. So as an example, today is one where my Savage won't move. We'll talk about that in a moment. Sometimes it will be setup specific and just in generality. So as an example, we have one coming up called my vehicle needs more forward bite. It might be part specific, such as my Tamiya 801 XT brake pad suck, or again, it might be vehicle specific, such as my Savage won't shift, etc., etc. I'll try to keep each one under 10 minutes. I can't promise it, especially this one since I had to do the opening, but let's get going. The big thing to understand in these videos is I'm going to explain the problem, explain what I went through, show you how I fix it, and most importantly of all, what caused it. Because I think that is how you learn. That is the only way you get better, is figure out what caused it and what you can do to prevent it from happening again. In this video here, here's what occurred. I was riding the Savage, everything was fine. Suddenly, the engine started revving, but the vehicle wasn't moving. I initially thought that I stripped the spur gear, but I didn't. Then I thought perhaps that I had busted a clutch spring. The reason I thought that is once I got it home, I started it up, I tried to drive it, and I noticed that the clutch bell continued to spin even when I applied the brakes. So I went ahead and I took off the engine, I looked at the clutch shoes. I was really hesitant and thinking that I had busted a clutch spring for the simple fact I've yet to bust a three shoe or even a 4-shoe clutch spring. I've busted a few 2-shoe ones. Those are the wraparound springs, but other than that, if you have it shimmed correctly and set up correctly, it takes a lot, to bust one of these. Now, this engine here is a lot, so I wasn't sure, but there's only one way to find out. So I took a look. So with the clutch shoes and springs looking fine, I then realized that the vehicle rolled fine when it was turned off. When the electronics were turned on, it rolled fine, and it stopped no problem at all. I did a high-level check of the differentials. Here's how you do that. Basically, you just hold one end of the vehicle up and turn one of the wheels, and the other one should spin in the opposite direction. So I did that on both sides. And as you can see, everything is fine on the differentials. So consequently, what's happening is everything is fine except when I apply throttle, it is not moving. It is engaging the clutch bell because the clutch bell is spinning. The spur gear is spinning as well. And when I apply the brakes, the spur gear continues to spin. When I noticed that, that's when I determined it has to be the transmission, specifically probably the slipper clutch. Now, I'm not a big slipper clutch guy. This is the only vehicle that uses it. All my other vehicles have a center diff instead of a transmission. But that's my thinking right now. So let's go ahead and verify that, yes or no. So if I hold the spur gear like this, I actually can run it backwards. That's interesting. I don't think that should be happening. If I hold it in tightly, it won't go backwards. This is telling me that perhaps the nut right here has come loose. Now, the way that a slipper clutch works is you have this plate right here. On the spur gear, you have this pad that allows the spur gear to slip on this plate. This plate is attached to this hub that turns when the shaft turns. So essentially, think of in terms of typically a center diff or something, a gear is going to be on a shaft that's going to turn. Well, this has something in between that will allow the shaft to turn at a certain RPM, but the spur gear to turn at a separate RPM, hence slipping. The way that you tune how much it slips is based on how much pressure gets applied, spur gear up against that plate, and of course you do that by tightening down the spur gear. So when you hear people say loosen your slipper clutch or tighten your slipper clutch, that's essentially what you're doing. Now, I can tell you in probably 9, maybe 10 gallons of the Savage, I've yet to have this come loose, but for all intents and purposes, that's what I think is happening. Only one way to find out. Let's go ahead and tighten down the slipper clutch. So interestingly enough, with it assembled like it is right now, I can only tighten it so much, else it just starts slipping. So I don't know if the plate got moved or if the slipper pad burnt out. Again, this is new to me, so let's see. Okay, well, there's your problem. It should look like this, not like this. This one here, probably 5 gallons. This one, not even a gallon. Okay, this is becoming very, very interesting. First, I'm trying to get the old pad off. And that's simply because I want to see if I can actually reuse another pad and put it on here because I don't want to lose the spur gear. Another story altogether. The question is, why did it burn? Well, I don't know. If you look it up online, the reason they burn is every reason under the sun except for user error. In other words, everybody says like, I was burning them up until I got a steel spur gear. I was burning them up until I put on aluminum clutch shoes. Or I was burning them up until this and that and that. Well, I'm hoping it was user error on my part. Now, the only user error that I've read is people said you had it too loose. Possibly that could be the case. However, here's where I'm thinking I did not have it too loose. Aside from the fact that it's burned, see if you can tell a difference. I'll tell you. This right here is raised. The little circle where the bushing goes on the other side. And what's happened is, you can see here's a normal one that's not burned. You can see it got pushed in, and you can even see the little marking on it. I'm also going to show you another huge red flag that something is wrong. I did a lot of spur gear testing back in the day when I was stripping them to determine why. So I actually have this little screwdriver that perfectly gets this bushing out every time. So you can see here's one right here. It's stripped, but I left the bushing in. All I do, put my screwdriver in, boom, it comes out, no problem. Here, put the screwdriver in, it goes through. Now the question is, can it go through this bushing? It cannot. That's the whole idea. However, it can go through this bushing rather easily. The only thing I can think of is it got pushed in so hard that it went in at an angle and got scored or something. I have no idea. But I don't care. Not now, at least. I went ahead and put a new bushing on, or old bushing that was fine, in good shape, and put it on the same spur gear with a different clutch pad. I don't think this is going to work, but I just want to try it at least. And then I'll worry about other things. Well, it's got some wobble to it right there, but again, wobble is only so bad. Now that sound didn't sound good. Now the first thing I'm going to do is reverse the plate. Now this time there is noticeably less wobble at slower RPMs. Now we'll listen to it again at higher RPMs. Same result. So at this point I have two known faulty artifacts. The spur gear where this is raised up right here. Also the spur gear where I put on this pad over something that wasn't flush. So, I mean, it feels flush, but obviously it's not. And then the slipper plate with just a little bit of dried pad on it. Again, it feels somewhat, no, it's not really, it's raised up about 1/4 of a millimeter. So what I'll do next is replace these two known jacked up parts with two that are good. Normal wobble at low RPMs. Now what I'm going to do is listen to it at high RPMs and hope not to hear that sound. Okay, so now I'm going to take the good spur gear, the good slipper clutch unit, put it on another transmission and see if I still hear that sound. When I took the hub off the transmission, I noticed one thing on the other side that looks like it shouldn't. Once again, what we'll call normal RPM, slow RPM wobble. And now at high speed. Now what I've done is removed this part, this known flawed part, at least from the way it looks, with a good hub, with a good spur gear, and a good plate. Same slow RPM wobble, this is normal. And now at high speed. So why did I go through all those different permutations? Well, it's simple. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a distinct issue with the transmission, or at least with the way that this was behaving with the transmission. I had to rule out every single. So here's where it gets really interesting. I put the exact same unit back on, the same spur gear, the same slipper clutch unit. I got as much as the slipper pad off as I could, and then I just put one on top of it. But you could see earlier that the spur gear was really jacked up where the bushing had gone through. I thought it was only going to last for like a minute and then strip, or who knows what it was going to do. But I was actually able to drive it for a few tanks. So at this point I capture the current state. I have a slipper clutch unit that is shady at best. Everything else should be fine, including the transmission. I drove it and it ran like crap. Specifically the engine. Now I have shown previously what an effect your clutch will have on your engine tune. Specifically the engine clutch itself, which again I validated is fine on here. So what this is telling me is that the slipper unit and or the clutch slipper pad, whatever, is wreaking havoc on this engine's tune. It behaved exactly as if the clutch nut had come loose from the engine clutch, which has happened to me a few times, so I'm familiar. It goes like really rich, then really lean, rich, lean, etc. So it appears. So what's the verdict? Did I find the problem? Absolutely. It was actually a lot simpler than I was even hoping. It was the slipper pad and or the slipper, excuse me, the spur gear itself. Did I fix the problem? To a degree, yes. In all candor, I imagine that quite a few people would have, would not even recognize some of the symptoms I'm seeing, just because, again, you guys have to understand I'm pretty OCD about acceleration, and I'm able to tell how the clutch is affecting the engine. Because for all intents and purposes, everything on it seems fine. Even holding it, it's not slipping, or it's slipping just as, as much as I'd want it to. On the bench, everything on the surface seems fine. Did I figure out how it happened? Kind of. I have my assumptions that I tightened it down too hard. However, I want to see if I can prove that out. I've got another spur gear on here where everything on it's fine. It's not malformed like this right here. So I'm going to tighten the hell out of it. Okay, here it is. I've got it tightened down. I actually used the socket wrench to tighten it as hard as I could by hand. You can see even the spring got kind of So, nope, it did not even make a mark. So, this is the bad one here. That's telling me I don't believe that I can do that by hand. Because again, I had it, and I was really, you know, throwing down the grip on it. Huh, well, so I don't know how it happened. But now I can tell you I'm pretty sure I did not tighten it that hard, because you can see here I jacked up the spring, and that was not like that prior to me just tightening it so hard. So as far as me over tightening it, nix that. So what's next? Well, it's really easy to say, I'm going to put on a better slipper clutch. But what's better? In other words, if I were to get a Robinson Generation 3 slipper clutch, what is better about it? Now, I can't use the argument, well, the pads won't burn up so quickly, because again, I went, you know, I've gone 7 gallons on a single slipper pad, stock. So I can't blame that. Well, it doesn't slip as much. Well, I mean, that's the whole idea of a slipper clutch, is you can tune it to slip as much as you like. So I guess where I'm going is I can't justify getting a better one because I don't know what better is. And until then, I'm going to continue the same charter I have since day one of this rebuild, and that is run stock until I can explicitly pinpoint a problem, then I fix it. Here, I have no idea what happened. I mean, I know what happened. I have no idea how it happened. I'm going to chalk it up to be just a freak thing because, again, it's happened one time, and I am over 10 gallons down this vehicle as a whole. So I'm going to get a new spur gear. I'm going to use the same unit and have at it again. And if something occurs, well, I'll just continue to troubleshoot it. So some quick lessons learned. Number one, service your slipper unit. So I found that it can feel good on the bench, but you know, going forward, every half gallon or so, I'm going to take it off, take a look at it, and make sure everything on it's fine. Second, it can really, really throw your tune off. Make sure you've got everything spot on, or if you're having issues tuning your engine, don't overlook your clutch and your slipper clutch. I also learned how the slipper unit affects your shifting. So as an example, I noticed at one point that with my other transmission that the shifting was much more violent. In other words, once I hit second gear, I mean, it boom, like a rocket. I wasn't getting that initially with this transmission, but once I really let it slip more, that's when I realized that the slipper setting also affects how powerful the second gear oomph is. So anyways, that's what I've learned. With that, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this this video. And apologies for the length of it, but oh well, that's how it rolls. Coming up next, I'm going to tackle this mid-tank lean.